Have a listen to this. Have a listen to this.
Interest rates are higher. I know people don't like that, but you should be welcoming the stronger economy.
And maybe a deal has a point about the machinery of capitalism being oiled with the blood of the workers.
The United States is a country that has always paid all of its bills.
Lannister always pays his debts.
Don't let the bastards get you.
Hello and welcome back to Comedian versus Economist. It's time for another episode of your favourite podcast. My name's Adam and we're joined as always by my little older brother and real-life economist, Thomas. Hi, Thomas.
Yeah, g'day, Adam. How you going?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Let's get straight into it because we've got a massive show coming up. There's fewer jobs around across the board these days, not just at Apple. The price of coffee beans is skyrocketing, which could make your morning brew morning brutal. And new stimulus measures arrived in China to try and get the party started, affectionately now being referred to as scoring some Xi Jinpingers. But first... Inflation, Thomas. I keep hearing about inflation. It's all everybody's talking about. Got some fresh charts out too at CVE Podcast on Instagram and Facebook if you want to see the charts, or at equitymates.com. Head to the Comedian versus Economist page. But Thomas, what do we got for inflation this week?
Well, I gave you some homework, right? I asked you to go check some economic commentary. You had a bit of some information. Mm-hmm.
You did, yeah. And I did that.
You
did some research.
Did you go to like the AFR or the Economist or one of those ones?
As I was doom scrolling Facebook, I came across the Adelaide Advertisers Facebook page, and they had just a single post that said monthly inflation falls to 2.7%. And I thought I'm just going to go through and read what the people think, Thomas. I'm sick of hearing from experts like yourself. I thought we need to find out what the everyman thinks about this inflation. Gavin chimed in. So monthly inflation falls to 2.7%. Gavin said, that's monthly increase. Times 12 is like 30% per annum. Let that sink in. Thomas, Gavin, I think, makes a great point. At this rate, in 10 years, we'll be at 300% inflation. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah. So inflation is always a yearly number. So 2.7% over the year.
27%. So you probably overshot it by 3.
Yeah, we don't need to times that by 12. But I understand where the confusion's coming from because, I know a year ago we didn't have monthly data. We only had quarterly data. And so the ABS has started going to monthly data. So that now and it's slightly different than the quarterly data, which is the official data. So now when they say monthly inflation, that means it's on the monthly read on it. Yeah. So that's all a bit fresh and new. So I get why Gavin's a bit confused there.
Oh, okay. Well, Lewis left a very simple comment that I think really highlights the pain people are going through. Lebanese cucumber still $11. Thomas, is the Lebanese cucumber in the basket of goods? And if not, why not? Well, I think the question we all want to know, are any cucumbers in the basket of goods?
Oh, I'm sure cucumbers are in there. Yeah, okay. Food, they'd be in the food sort of section. And
You'd hope so. Unless people are doing their laundry with a cucumber.
But food prices, they're holding up and probably not coming down as quick as the rest of the basket. And I think food's a substantial part of the basket, but there's a lot more in there because it's meant to be a total cost of living measure. So, it's not all just about food.
Oh, fair enough. There was another comment from the Coral Balmoral 50th Anniversary Commemorative Service and UGC presentation. I think someone forgot to log out of their page account and before providing their fresh take on the inflation rate, manipulated to that level. So I think they're saying this is an architected thing. In actual terms of measurement was actually 3.4. Why can't they be transparent and truthful, Thomas, says the Coral Balmoral 50th Anniversary Commemorative Service and UGC presentation page. And don't forget to RSVP to the celebration dinner if you haven't already. They're not playing. They're not playing over at the 50th Anniversary Commemorative Service and UGC presentation.
That was a tight name, though, isn't it?
Shout outs to everyone at the Coral Balmoral 50th anniversary commemorative service. Did you see the presentation?
Yeah, so headline fell to 2.7%, but that's all on the back of a 15% fall in electricity prices, which was driven by government subsidies.
Right.
And so you strip that out, and trimmed mean, which is closer to the RBA's preferred measure, that was 3.4%, which was barely changed over the month. So, and the RBA was saying that they're planning to look through the fall in the artificial fall in electricity prices, because that's not indicative of the actual heat in the economy. Yeah, and that's why they're as far as they're concerned, inflation's still running at 3.4%. The really interesting thing with this, though, is the RBA is assuming that the subsidies are going to be unwound next year.
Yeah.
And there's a few commentators saying, well, that's probably not very likely because it's an election year, and if they just cancelled the subsidies with the increase in electricity prices that's probably baked in from wholesale prices, you're looking at a 50% increase in your bills. So no government is going to take a 50% increase in the household electricity bill to an election year.
Right.
And so they're saying, like, the assumption that the RBA is making that the subsidies are going to end and be wound back is a false assumption, is going to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
It's like the toll road subsidies in New South Wales, they're forever subsidies. Like, they're in and then they're just there forever. And saying, like, quite possibly electricity is going to be the exact same story. Once it's in there, it's very hard to get rid of.
Yeah, right. Interesting. All right. Don't forget too, if you are planning on attending the Coral Balmoral 60th anniversary commemorative service and UGC presentation, you can buy your tickets this year to lock in prices. 2034 tickets at 2024 prices. All right, Thomas, jobs. What's happening with jobs? Job openings and vacancies are down, I see, looking at this chart, which you can also find on @CV Podcast, Instagram, Facebook. Thomas, jobs.
Yeah. Well, no, the job market is crushing it still in Australia. Yeah. Like, so one of the reasons why the RBA is not.
So I've completely misinterpreted this fairly simple chart.
Yes. Well, the chart you're looking at is job ads in various countries. And so we have had quite a sharp fall in job ads in Australia, but nowhere near what we've seen in, like, New Zealand, for example, or in other places.
Right.
So the fall in job ads has been the most mild in the OECD in Australia. So yeah, the labour market's crushing it, and the RBA has noted that this is unusual. So that the other chart I've got there is saying that the participation rate is at record highs. So more people participating in the labour force than ever, and that's unusual. We're like in the top, like we've had one of the biggest increases in the world in terms of participation.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, like, normally, like a lift in that kind of participation, there's more people in the market. You need more jobs, otherwise the unemployment rate's going to go up. So you need to be creating jobs for all of that. But the economy's doing that. We're doing that, where the unemployment rate's holding at 4.2%. That's, still close to the lowest levels in 50 years. And so even with a big pickup in the participation rate, it's kind of crushing it. And that's kind of why the RBA can be pretty relaxed about letting inflation get back to target before they feel they need to cut, because unemployment rate's still really tight.
Well, take that, AI. Everyone that said AI was going to take everyone's job. I heard a good quote the other day, actually, about AI. It said, AI won't replace people, but people using AI will replace people. And so maybe, like, that's, at least for now, it's far too early to call that that AI isn't going to take everyone's job. But that's good. But what does it do for our rate cut expectations and inflation and stuff? That's not going to be good news for that, is it? If everyone who wants a job's got a job.
Yeah, or two jobs.
Who wants two jobs?
That's the other chart we've got here, is that multiple job holders has spiked. So it's gone from like about 5% of the labour force to just under 7%.
What?
So, yeah.
Why?
I think that's the cost of living crisis. So people who are getting by on one job, like maybe, in a 2-person household, one person is working part-time on one job. With the cost of living crisis, maybe they're going like, actually, now I need 2 jobs for us to get by.
And then you've also got Scott Morrison, who's got like 5 jobs.
Still.
It's a bit of an outdated reference now.
They're still going through the Google Docs and changing commissions, getting Scott Morrison out of everything.
All right, why don't we take a break here? We'll grab a word from this week's sponsor and be back with more CVE right after this. Welcome back here on Comedian versus Economist. You can send us an email if you like, cve@equitymates.com or via the website, equitymates.com/CVE. And in case I haven't mentioned it, I know I have, you can get all the charts that we're looking at right now on at CVE Podcast on Instagram and Facebook or on the website. But Thomas, we're talking coffee and people get excited when we start talking coffee. Very dear and important to people. Don't mess with coffee. Why are we talking about coffee?
Yeah, well, a bit of a crisis brewing. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice pun.
Oh, brewing, yeah. I didn't even see that. It just comes naturally to me. Yeah, but no, coffee prices for Arabica are up 56% this year, up to record highs. Yeah, but basically there's big sort of environmental disruptions to the big bean producing countries, particularly Brazil and Vietnam.
Yeah.
Yeah, so bean prices are through the roof.
I heard it was the environmental impacts was possibly related to climate change, in the sense that if climate change keeps getting worse and the planet keeps rising in temperature, the coffee crops suffered as a result of it basically just being too hot, and they just stopped doing their coffee making thing, photosynthesizing. And so if the temperatures keep going up, we're going to I don't want to be a doomsayer, but this feels like really bad. This is not just about like, oh no, coffee prices are going up. This feels like, oh no, this could be the end of coffee.
Yeah, well, yeah, potentially.
Or do we just move it and grow it in Adelaide or something?
Oh, Adelaide roasters. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I mean, that's sort of a story facing a whole bunch of crops. The climate's just a brand new climate and the crops at work just stop working there. So, yeah, this could be the tip of the iceberg. But
that's only one part of the story, right? The bean prices.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think cafes are doing it tough because the cost of everything in the economy are going up, and particularly with things that go into running a cafe. It's not just coffee beans, but, you know, you've got labour and all the other bits and bobs. So all of that's going up.
Beard oil, moustache wax for the baristas.
Yeah, bespoke vinyl doesn't press itself.
I don't mean to stereotype the. Shout out to all the baristas out there, actually. Do amazing work. I love you all.
Your coffee tomorrow is going to be so lukewarm.
Is this oat milk?
ABC had an article and they're saying that they had quoted a cafe owner, Lincoln Tester in Madison's Cafe, saying that coffee should probably be selling for $8 given it is handcrafted and takes two people to do and they are time consuming. Coffee shops and cafes are falling over because they are not charging the right price. And so I think you have this interesting situation in the industry right now is that every coffee shop should probably be charging more for their coffees. It should be more like $7 or $8 than $5.
Yeah.
$5 is the average price nationwide, apparently. But because we're in a cost of living crisis and the luxury spend, I don't know if you call cafe, you know, it's at least discretionary, it's not an essential, that total spend is shrinking. And so it's very competitive in the cafe industry right now because everyone's competing over a shrinking spending pie.
Right.
And so they're not able to increase prices in that environment. Yeah. And so they're kind of going to go bust. And some guy I saw saying that 1 in 11 cafes are expected to go bankrupt. So 2,000 cafes over the next 12 months. So 1 in 11 cafes expected to go bankrupt in the next 12 months. And that's on the back of close to 2,000 going bankrupt in the last 12 months. So it's quite a shakeout happening in the hospitality sector. And then once that happens, then, you know, once it becomes less competitive and the dead wood gets cut out, then I think coffee prices will jump and we'll be paying $7, $8 for a coffee.
Oh, man. I mean, one point of correction, fact check, is coffee is not discretionary. Coffee is essential. But Yeah, that's worrying. So that means we could all be. I mean, if there's one thing I know that people love to complain about, it's the price that they paid for coffee. Like when it went to $5. If you pay more than $5, like you'll hear about it. If you someone paid $5.60, like, man, $5.60 I paid for this coffee. If we hit $6. We're going to be just swamped with people complaining about it.
Yeah. I mean, half the comments on the Adelaide Advertiser Facebook group were about coffee.
Yeah, that's right. And the Coral Balmoral 50th Anniversary Commemorative Service in UGC presentation apparently is running tea only. All right, Thomas, finally on the show, China has announced some stimuli. What's going on in China?
Yeah, so this has been anticipated. Everyone's sort of wondering what the government's going to do because the economy is slowing quite sharply and it's not looking like it's going to turn around anytime soon. So we're expecting some stimulus to come.
Okay.
And so we got an announcement last week that gave people a bit of excitement. Commodity prices, commodity futures lifted a bit. Miners did well on the ASX. But I don't know, it seems a little bit overblown. But there are a couple of interesting things that they're doing. One is that they're dropping the reserve ratio to 9.5%. Right. So what that's saying is like for banks, like if you put $100 in a bank, they can lend that out. But the reserve ratio says that they've got to keep, so if it's 9.5%, they've got to keep $9.50 of that $100 in reserve, and then they can lend the rest out.
Right.
And so the reserve ratio...
It's such a discomforting thought that if I give my bank $100, they're allowed to lend 90 of it out to someone else. Like you just have this, in your mind, you're always like, oh, my money's safe in the bank. Like, well, we're hanging on to $9 of it. The other 90 is someone else has got now.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that comes around. So that goes out and then comes back, and then they keep $9 of it or 10% and lend the rest out.
Which is why they're so screwed if there's a run on the banks, right? Like if we get into this crisis where there's a run on and people are like, everyone says I'm taking my money out. They're like, oh, shit. We haven't got it.
That just doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're lowering it. So it's,
and that's the idea, like it'll sort of, it increases the money multiplier and get more money flowing around the economy. And it's sort of like in Australia, we've moved away, and most developed countries, we don't use the reserve ratio as a policy lever. We kind of use it as a stability mechanism, and it's sort of set, and there's sort of like rules around tier one capital and things with the idea of preserving the integrity of the banks. Within China, it's interesting that they're using it as a policy lever. So it was up around 21% back in 2011, and it's steadily been ratcheting down. Right. And now it's down to 9.5%. Huh. So I've got a chart there that sort of, so it's interesting that that's still happening in China. And I think they're just trying to do whatever they can to get things juicing. I think 9.5% I think is still reasonably high in the global scheme of things. So it's not like this, like they're being super risky with their banking sector, but definitely more risky.
Do you know what Australia's at by any chance? Is that like, do we have a number?
I couldn't tell you actually. No. I kind of want to say 6%, but then I'm thinking that kind of doesn't sound right, and I'm just making that number up. But that's economic.
Sounds good to me.
Good. But the other thing that they're doing, headline there, they're mulling a $113 billion stock stability fund.
Oh yes,
through
I like
funds
this.
from the People's Bank of China.
Right.
Which just seems insane.
Okay.
So if the stock market starts to wobble and you get a bit of a crash, the People's Bank of China is going to step in, and they've got $113 billion to spend to make sure stock prices don't crash.
Ooh. That's like, isn't that just your run of the mill market manipulation? If this was in America or someone, like if someone was doing this, wouldn't that be sort of illegal?
Oh, I mean, it's hard to imagine it. Well, no one's going to buy into a crash, right?
Well, isn't that what the stability fund does, though?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But they're going to lose money on it, right? Like stock prices want to be lower, and they want to move lower, and they're going to stop them from doing that, which means buying higher than the market, the clearing price would be.
Yeah.
So they're going to lose money. But more just it creates a massive perverse incentive in the market because it's like, oh, I'm just going to buy into the bubble because if it starts to look like it's going to pop, the People's Bank of China is just going to bail it out.
Yeah, right.
It's like, it's pretty wild.
This has got Reddit post all over it. Someone in Wall Street Bets just going like, get into this company in China because the government's going to prop it up with like $113 billion from the People's Bank of China.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know what the market cap of the Chinese stock market is. I expect 113 billion is still kind of small, but
yeah, right.
I mean, it's still pretty substantial.
There was a quote from the head of the People's Bank of China who just said, "I like the stock." Apparently that was his position. So I guess we'll see how that plays out. All right, that does us for this week. Another episode of Comedian versus Economist. Thank you so much for tuning in. Find all the charts, as I say, at CBE Podcast, Instagram, Facebook, or on the equitymates.com website. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. Until then, it's bye for now.
Comedian vs. Economist is a product of Equity Mates Media. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional finance, legal, or tax advice. The hosts of Comedian vs. Economist are not financial professionals and are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. Do not take financial advice from a podcast. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the Equity Mates website where you can find ASIC resources and find a registered financial professional near you. In the spirit of reconciliation, Equity Mates Media and the hosts of Comedian vs. Economist acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today.